Okay, so, I've read two Cassie Clare books. This is a video for the first one since my last video, and this is Ghosts of the Shadow Market. And this is by Cassandra Clare, Tessa Is Pregnant, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Link, and Robin Weisserman. Okay, it's by all these people, and it's so good, but the one disappointment I really had with it was, and this is probably an unfair disappointment, but look, you see the illustration we got here? Because we always get illustrations in the bind-ups. And I'd gotten used to, after the last two bind-ups, of those illustrations being like little comic strips of a scene in the story done by Cassandra Jean. I'd gotten very accustomed to that. And now they're done by someone else, and I don't know who, because again, it doesn't specifically tell me who the illustrator is. That irritates me. Why can't you just tell me who illustrated? Why do you never say? And if you do, can you put it in a more obvious place? So, my apologies to the illustrator, because the drawings still are very pretty. I've just grown extremely partial to Cassandra Jean's way of illustrating Cassandra Clare's work. I've just grown very partial to it. And I'm going to apologize right now for the lighting, but I was almost going to film this tomorrow, but I just decided to get it done today. Okay, so in The Ghost of the Shadow Market, we follow, it's a series of short stories, all centered around various shadow markets, so not one shadow market, but various ones. And the running theme in them is in each of these stories, Jem visits the shadow market. Whether at the time he's Brother Zachariah or he's Jem, he will visit a shadow market at some point in this story. And that's why he's on the cover. That's why we have our boy Jem. And yeah, it's set through all different time periods of his life. And like I said, all over, because like they visit a shadow market in Buenos Aires at one point, and one in America, and the New York one, and a whole bunch of different ones, I promise you. Really? Don't expect me, and the London one, they visit the London one, but don't expect me to remember each one, okay? Just don't. But it was so good, and you see characters from each and every one of Cassandra's stories. So you see characters from the Infernal Devices, you see characters from the Last Hours, you see characters from the Dark Artificers, and you see characters from the Mortal Instruments. Now, first thing I want to say, if you're planning on reading The Last Hours, read The Ghosts of the Shadow Market. Also read the other two companion novels, but read this one in particular. It gives background into two of the main characters that we meet in Chain of Gold, and they just gave me so much more depth to those characters when I read that book, and I already formed an attachment because I read about them in this book. So just please read this book if you're planning to read Chain of Gold. Please and thank you. The other thing I wanted to preface is something I've discovered that really helps me when I get done with this is filming these videos, because I get to talk about my feelings, but also watching my YouTubers talk about their feelings about these books. But often they don't do a review for the companion novels. The only one that I've watched as an actual review is Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. And yes, the companion novel is brilliant, but I think Ghost of the Shadow Market and the Main Chronicles equally deserve reviews by my favorite YouTubers, but they aren't doing it, and it makes me sad. But I'm doing it because this book was amazing and it was so good. And read it, okay? Yes, it's a companion. You don't necessarily have to, but do it. Do it. Do it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna get into it. So from this point on, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers! You have been warned. Good. Okay. So first off, we have a story that involves Matthew Fairchild. This is the youngest son of Charlotte and Henry Branwell. And I adore him. From the minute we meet him, I adore him. But he needs to talk to people. That is his problem. He doesn't talk to anyone. And at this point when I was writing this, I despised Alistair. Okay, basically what happens in this story is we get a little bit of a flashback to Matthew's time at the academy and when he got Christopher to bob the wings so that he could get expelled, and but equally we've got time where it seems to be like a year or two before Chain of Gold, and basically when he was at the academy, Alistair was spreading, he didn't start the rumor, but he was helping spread it, a nasty rumor that Matthew was the result of Charlotte having an affair with Gideon Lightwood. And if you got to know something about Matthew, Matthew loves his dad. He loves Henry. He loves him so much. And since he was 6 years old, he's always been the one to take care of his dad, because Henry may be my favorite character from the Infernal Devices, but he's a bit absent-minded. He literally at one point, I remember, he was so excited by having a breakthrough with his invention, he didn't realize his hair had caught fire. And yeah, so Matthew's been looking after his father, so to hear this rumor just shattered him, because he loves him so much, and it shattered him, and he thought it might be true, because he doesn't look a lot like his parents, and his dad is in a wheelchair, so it's plausible that, the plumbing down there doesn't work anymore, and he's a child, and I'm just like, he should have spoken to his parents, and they could have assured him of the truth, but he didn't, and so he bought a truth potion from this fae in the market. Turns out she hates shadow hunters, but and he gave it to his mother, and as a result of that, Charlotte lost a pregnancy. It killed his unborn sibling, and he has to live with that guilt. And I'm like, look, that fae chick who needs to die, and Alistair both to blame for this as well. Alistair should not have said what he said. We also meet Thomas Lightwood, who is Gideon and Sophie's son, and he's so lovely. He's so sweet. At this point, he's tiny, and we meet Christopher Lightwood, who is the son of Gabriel and Cicely, and I love him. He's like Henry. He's a genius. He's so jealous. And we see James, and I thought this must be James pre-Grace. We met her in the Bane Chronicles, if you've watched my review of that, because he seems to be doing better. He's happier. He seems more like himself. And the four of them are called the Merry Thieves, and they seem to have a wonderful friendship, and I loved reading about it. And we got to hear from Jem's point of view as a silent brother, and I found that utterly fascinating, about how he tries so hard to cling to his humanity. But equally, when you're a silent brother, you can hear the voices of all the other brothers in your head constantly. And, well, like, you can block them out if you want to, but they're there, and I'm like, that's interesting. And we meet Lucy Herondale for the first time. We meet her properly, and she seems absolutely lovely. And she writes letters to Cordelia Carstairs, and it's so cute. And then the next story. Oh my goodness, the next story. The next story is one of the reasons why I'm wearing this shirt. We meet Anna Lightwood, and I'm not sure what she identifies as, that's not explicitly said in the books, but so lovely. She's genderqueer, and we see them find their true self in this story, and it is so beautiful. So Anna has long acknowledged that she feels for women what she should feel for men. And all her close family members know about this, and everyone's okay with it, and that sort of thing. And then she meets this fellow Shadowhunter who's of the same age as her, called Adrienne Bridgestock. And she's the adopted daughter of the Inquisitor. And she falls hard and she falls fast for this girl. And they spend a lot of time together, and they actually it seemed a little bit quick for me. And they trained together, and it was developing into quite a cute little romance. And equally, like I said, she's finding their true self, and so she borrows her brother's suits and puts them on because she feels more comfortable in suits than they do in dresses. So I keep switching between she and they, but like I said, I'm not entirely sure of her they preferred pronouns. So if you do, please let me know in the comments. I don't want to be using the wrong ones. But point is, finds these suits, and I'm just. And it just is a legend. But then Adrian breaks her heart because she informs her that she's going to marry Charles Buford Fairchild. This is Matthew's older brother, because it's what's expected of her. It's a good match, and she wants children. And she's like, I thought you understood that this was never going to go anywhere. And then so Anna decides she's never going to allow love to do that to her again. She's not going to risk her heart again, which I honestly find a bit sad. But we see more of Christopher, and he is adorable. So adorable. And such an inventor, and he and Anna have such a beautiful sibling bond. And we learn they have a much younger sibling called Alexander, who's like 2 or 1, he's a toddler. And Cicely and Gabriel are amazing parents. They show such support for her that Cicely buys her a whole new wardrobe just of suits for her to mix and match to her own design. And I'm just like, yes. Yes, this is parenting, yes. And during the story, Jem is trying to figure out who Tessa's father is, because James has abilities, so they're trying to figure out who Tessa's father is to see if they can help James, control his abilities. And we figure out it's a graded demon, but we don't figure out anything else. And then there was this warlock in it that he spoke to, who was working with Mortimain, called Leopolda, but she gets killed by werewolves, so we don't have to worry about her, which is good. And it was just, it was so beautiful. Wait, I'm going to show you a picture of Anna. Look at this person. Aren't they just a legend? So amazing. So amazing. The story was called Every Exquisite Thing, and I was just like, yes. Anna is exquisite. Okay, the next story was about Sister Amelia teaming up with Jem, brother Zachariah. So we learn a lot more about the Iron Sisters and the Silent Brothers. This is Sister Amelia's last test before she can fully become an Iron Sister. And they basically have to get this piece of adamantus back that's in this place and figure out what's been going on at this circus, because there's been strange reportings and strange things have been happening. It's all been very strange. And Sister Amelia is fabulous because she outwitted the greater demon Bilal. And now that I know who that is in Chain of Gold, I find that all the more impressive. Bilal had owed... what time was this set, actually? When he's still a Shadow Hunter, but when... 1936! Okay. So this story happened after the events in Chain of Gold, because that's set in 1903. Actually, that's really interesting. That is set so long after. This adds a new layer of context, which I will explain in Chain of Gold. I don't want to do spoilers here. But, this demon owed Jem a debt, so he wouldn't attack, and Sister Amelia basically was able to get the demon to give Jem this sort of vision thing of him and Will remembers this as well, of them being young one last time, because it's at a point in time when he's dying of old age at this point, and it's heartbreaking, but they get this one last time together, and it's so sweet, and I love Sister Amelia, and I'm like, I want to see you again, baby. but I don't know if we will, because we won't see her in Chain of Gold, because she isn't an Iron Sister then. Then the next story is all about Kat and Tessa. They're nurses during World War II. And in each of these stories, the other recurring theme is Jem finding more information out about the Lost Herondale, which if you've read The Dark Artifices, you know what I'm talking about. And it's all about how he gets all this information and that sort of thing, and so Jem is really trying, but he gets stabbed by a fae, because obviously they don't want Shadowhunters messing about in their first air business. But Jem's confused, because he's like, I'm looking for a Herondale, this is Shadowhunter business, and they're like, no it isn't. But Jem doesn't know that, so yeah, it's interesting. And then Jem and Tessa are still very much in love, because he goes to Tessa and Kat to get help, to get healed, because he can't go to his Silent Brothers for it, because he wasn't really supposed to be doing what he was doing, but and gets healed, and we get a bit more detail into Kat, because she raised the first Lost Herondale, and she came across one of his descendants, and they had a fight, and Jem reassures her that she hasn't spoken to him not because they had a fight, but because he had to flee with this fae girl he fell in love with. It wasn't her fault. He didn't want to bring trouble to you. In the previous story, he actually spoke of Katrina and how much he loved her, and how he was like a second mother to him, or grandmother, I don't know what, something like that. And he didn't want to put her in danger, so he decided never to speak to her again. And I'm like, oh, you Herondales, you're so sacrificial. Okay, the next story just made me sad. It wasn't happy at all. It was very sad. So, we learn more about Celine Monteclaire, and if you don't know who that is the mother of Jace in the Mortal Instruments series. And she is a lovely but naive girl, but we learn that she was been constantly abused by her parents, but because they're powerful members in the Clave, she hasn't been able to get any help. And she's manipulated by Valentine because she's in love with Stefan Herondale, but Stefan is is it pronounced Stefan or Stephen? I call him Stefan. Is married to Artemis, but Valentine wants to break up that marriage because this is after Luke betrayed Valentine by becoming a werewolf, and he gets Celine's parents tried, and she's very much backed into a corner. She doesn't realize until the end of the story that she's been backed into a corner, and her only choice is to actually marry Stefan, which is what she wanted, but she didn't want it this way. She wanted Stefan to love her, which he does not. He loves Artemis. But we also meet Rosemary Herondale, and she seems like an absolute badass, and this is Kit's mother from The Dark Artifices, and we find out Johnny Rourke loved her so much that he pretended he was the one that was the descendant of the Herondales to try and save her, to spare her. And she meets Jem, and Jem puts a charm on the necklace so that if she ever gets into trouble, she just has to squeeze it and ask for help, and Jem will come. And then in the next story, we see young Lightwoods and a young Jace, and they're so cute. Alec is so cute, he's so cute, he's so cute. He meets Raphael, and he's just like, he's got like stars in his eyes. He thinks Raphael is really cute, and so he thinks he's amazing. That's how he describes him. And so he goes up to him and he's like, I'm Alec Lightwood. And he's like, I'm almost 12. And Raphael looks at him like, get away from me, small child. Because it turns out that there's this supply of Yinfen that's coming to New York, so Raphael has sought out Jem's help because he doesn't trust the Lightwoods after what they did the last time they were in New York, where they killed all the White Laws. So that's been, like, a recurring issue. And it was just so cute because it's a throwback to how in the Bane Chronicles he goes up to Alec. Alec and Magnus were on their date, and he's like, "Wait, you're Alec Lightwood?" He's like, "Yes. I distinctly remember you being 12. And he's like, "Well, I'm not anymore." Or in the Red Scrolls of Magic, when they meet again, he's like, "I remember you being 12. I distinctly remember you being 12. And I'm like, it's from that meeting. Anyway, turns out Jace is on the boat. And we meet Lily as well, and it's her first meeting with Jem, and it's like, brother Snackaraya. And Jem at this point is losing his humanity. He's forgetting his humanity, but when he sees Jace on the boat and he's talking to him, he gets reminded about Will and Tessa and who he was. And it was just, it was so beautiful. And so the band's teamed up with the Shadowhunters to stop the Yinfen. And then we move on to the best story, in my very biased opinion, in this book. And that is The Land I Lost. It's mainly from Alec's point of view. Like, obviously we get Jem's point of view as well, but it's mainly from Alex. And this is set during Lady Midnight. This is what Alec was doing in Lady Midnight when Magnus visited Los Angeles. And we get Malik family feels. We get to see little Max. And apparently little Max has to go through daily temptations. So Magnus has to summon this demon Elias, which if you've read the Bane Chronicles, you know who he is. He's actually quite funny for a demon. It's really funny because so Elias is just trying to persuade Max to work with him. And then Max is like, Uncle Jace says, Uncle Jace hunts the demons, hate demons. And Elias is like, have you ever considered that your uncle is a very hurtful person who likes stabbing things too much? And Max is like, no, love Uncle Jace, hate demons. And then his love for Chairman Meow, he picks up Chairman Meow and he like holds him and he's like, you are my meow friend. And Alec thinks to himself as he stares at them, Chairman Meow had lived a life of torment since Max had learned to walk. And then it's just Alec being amazing. Alec is his best self in this story. And we get to see Alec and Lily's friendship, and we see, like, the love that the New York Vamp Clan has for Alec, because he walks in with Jace because basically Jem and Tessa have summoned him to Buenos Aires, because they need his help, because the people in the Shadow Market will only talk to one Shadow Hunter, and that Shadow Hunter is Alexander Lightwood. And so he has to go there, but he's like, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm going to ask Lily to come with me. And when he just walks casually into the Hotel de Mort, they're like, hey, Alec! Like, Elliot's glad to see him. He's like, and one of the people getting fed on is like, I had to sign a consent form, don't worry, I'm here willingly. It's like, it's very funny. And then, so I'm trying to dodge this light thing, so keep moving this way. And then, let's see, Alex starts telling them off, telling Elliot off, and Lily's like, do I hear someone bossing my people around down there, Alec? And he's like, the New York Vampire Clan was very interesting. They won't take orders, but when I start bossing them around, they, like, immediately enliven. Raphael had really done a number on these people. And then, so Lily agrees to go with him, and she's leaving, and it leaves Elliot in charge as, like, her second in command. And he's like, no, don't leave me in charge, Jace, let me turn you into a vampire. You can be in charge, you can lead us. And today. It's just like, I remember a time when I'd come in here and nearly be killed, and now it's all offers for immortality. And so when Alec gets to Buenos Aires, he realizes the institute there is not doing great. So he goes to the Shadow Market, and we see the respect that Alec has accrued in the Downworld community for starting the Shadowhunter Downworld Alliance. And when he gets there, and he gets let in, because he proves he's Alec Lightwood, we see Juliet. If you've read the Red Scrolls of Magic, Juliet is from that, and he saved her life, and she is amazing. She is the queen of the Shadow Market, and she remembers Alec, and she took his advice, because he asked her if she could feed Rose, this starving Fae girl he saw in the Shadow Market in Paris. She took it a step further and adopted her, and then she's adopted 2 other kids because Alec's so inspired. And so when she explains these are my kids, and she's getting very defensive, Alec's like, oh, yes, and this is my son Max. And then he's pulling out his phone and showing pictures of Max, and they see Max is a warlock, and the respect that Alec is getting skyrockets. And the kids and then when she embarrasses Rosie, who's the Fae girl, she's like, Mom, don't embarrass me in front of Alexander Lightwood. And Jem and Tessa get the full story of the first air. We meet that nasty Fae woman who gave Matthew the bad poison thing in the first one. And he tells her what she did, and she's like, I killed an unborn baby. He's like, yes, you did. But we also meet Raphael. This little Shadowhunter boy, he's 5 or 6, and he's been living in the Shadow Market since the Institute collapsed at the end of the Dark War. And so Alec ends up adopting him. Magnus obviously agrees to after 2 days. And it's funny because Rafi doesn't speak English and Alec doesn't speak Spanish. So they kept trying to communicate with each other. It's very funny. And Alec basically reforms the Buenos Aires Institute. He gets the head of the Institute arrested for all the stuff he's been doing. He's been kidnapping warlock females and werewolf women and giving them to this warlock who's doing these awful experiments. And yeah, he shuts that down, and he gets this guy Joe Quinn, who he met, to be in charge. And Joe Quinn, as soon as Joe Quinn meets Juliet, he's in love. And it's really funny because it's like, I'm sure you can work with Juliet, the queen of the Shadow Market. And he stares at her, and then he kisses her hand. He's like, no one told me the queen of the Shadow Market was so beautiful. And then Juliet's just like, I should get back to my kids. And he's like, oh, it must be hard being a single mother. It's hopefully it's single, please? And she's like, well, it hasn't been great at the moment, no. And he's like, that's wonderful. And then immediately goes to endear himself to her children. And Juliet's so baffled because she's like, what's he doing? I don't even know his name. And Lily's just like, do you enjoy intensely serious romantic relationships? Because Shadowhunters tend to get fixated. It's very true. Shadowhunters, they're usually one and done. And so Joaquin has decided Juliet is his wife. It's yes. And we get Lily's backstory, which is the one really big downer in this thing, apart from the first day of business. She was, it was awful. Her mother was this woman in China who was sold to this man, and the man kept her for a bit, enough for Lily to be born and to be brought up a little, but he eventually got bored of her and gave her to a house of ill repute, till her mother got old and died, but it was a house with vampires, and Lily managed to persuade the vampires to make her one of them, and then she killed all of them, and then she somehow made her way to Camille. It was still very sad. And then they get back to New York with Raphael, and this is really funny because Alec's talking to his dad outside, and his dad considers the most fun thing he did was a very awkward dinner. He's like, okay, we need to invite my dad around more often. Clearly he's not getting out much. But the other funny thing is, and this was hysterical, apparently whenever Lily leaves and Alec goes with her, Elliot calls Robert round to have a conversation. Like, it's like to have dinner, and he's very charming. Like, Robert goes, he's very charming. He even gave me his number so I could contact him in case of an emergency. And Alec's like, I don't know how to tell him that Elliot was hitting on him. And Max loves his new brother, and he wants to be a shadow hunter. There's a very adorable scene with Max and Raffi, and it's like, where he goes, he's like, Papa is a warlock, Daddy is a shadow hunter, and I'm a shadow hunter. And Raffi's just like, no, you're not, you can't be. We go a warlock, and that's great, because you can do magic. He's like, I'm a shadow hunter! It's so cute. Oh. Okay, the next one is a little bit sadder, because Rosemary calls Jem for help, but Jem arrives too late, and she was so brave, and now she's dead. Everything is tragic. But, on the bright news, Tessa is pregnant. Yay! He's gonna have a baby. And at the very end, we see Will looking at them when they find the news of the baby, and he's like, a new soul made of you and Tessa. I can hardly wait to meet such a paragon. Because I really like this thing that they put in Queen of Air and Darkness, of the idea that ghosts that, who aren't stuck on the mortal plane because they have unfinished business, can visit at very important moments in their loved ones' lives. I really like that idea, that the ghosts can do that. And then in the next story, we check in with Livy and Ty. And they adopt a lynx called Irene. Of course they do. They find this injured lynx. So we learn that Livy is now like a permanent ghost and is always hovering around Ty, and they're trying to test the limits. And during one of those times where they're trying to test the limits, she finds this lynx. And so they realize that they can't get into Idris, but maybe Livy could. So Livy tries going there. And first she fails, and she goes to LA, and she gets annoyed because her family can't see her, and she does a bit of poltergeisty stuff, which she kind of freaks out about because she hasn't been able to do that before. And then she gets to Idris, and she overhears the cohort, and guess what? I was right. I called it. The cohort are starving because they can't get food. I knew it. I knew it. They're also planning a sneak attack and spying on the rest of the world, because obviously they have no lives. And Mina gets born, but it's all very tense because Livy kind of has a freak out and causes all the windows to explode because she needs to tell Magnus what she saw in Idris. But she keeps getting distracted and forgetting to do that. But the baby is born and has got the unfortunate name of Wilmina, because obviously they name her after Will, but they're going to call her Mina. And she's got a Chinese middle name, but I'm not going to say it because I'm going to mispronounce it. And so Magnus basically tells him that Livy needs to stick close to Ty, and Kit gives his mother's necklace with Magnus's protection on it to give to Ty, and it's very cute. And throughout this entire thing, Livy's been telling Ty to write Kit a letter. Write him a letter. You need to talk to him. And then she talks to Kit at one point, and she's like, why don't you just talk to him? And then she goes, boys, they're so stupid about communication. Because clearly they both want to talk to each other, but neither will do the damn thing. But then Livy basically orders Ty to write to him. It's like, you've got to write to him at least to thank him for the necklace. And then Anush might be Ty's friend in the future. I'm not sure of this. And then in the final book, we see that Kit is doing well with Jem and Tessa. He's finally really settling down and having a family and having loving parents who actually care about him and tell them that they love him. And Mina is adorable, and Kit is a good big brother. And Jem doesn't realize he's attractive. He really doesn't know that he's attractive. But on the downside, we see something that I was just so upset about. We see Janice. Now, Janice is the name for Thule Jace, who we met in Queen of Air and Darkness. And we know he's back here. And so in this story, he's being a massive creep, and he's stalking Alec. Because he realizes, okay, he speaks to Lily, and Lily realizes he's not Jace, and he's about to kill her when he promises he can bring back Raphael, which he actually can't do, but she's like, okay, because she desperately wants Raphael back. And I'm just like, Lily, no, darling, you're smarter than this. Just go tell Alec that you saw fake Jace. Go tell him. Anyway, so he decides to stalk Alec, because he's found out he's the consul, and he realizes he needs more information, because his initial plan is to replace, our Jace. And he sees how well Alec is doing and remembers how Alec died, and he's got very complicated feelings for Alec. But then he also gets the opportunity at this point to speak to Clary, because Clary thinks he's the other Jace, and he kisses her, and then he kind of breaks down, and he also killed a bunch of people during this. And he feels that Jace is... And so he realizes he could never fulfill that Jace's shoes. He could never do it. Because he just doesn't know enough, and he's decided he hates everyone in that world because they abandoned him. And I'm like, dude, they didn't abandon you. They didn't know you existed. You're from a different dimension, you freak. And his reaction to Simon being a shadow hunter is actually quite funny, because he's like, what on earth happened in this world? We also learned that Simon died in Thule, so it's another death that happened there. But he's irrationally mad. It's like, they're not your family. They didn't abandon you, clearly, because they're still with Jace. And he's mad at current Jace because he deems him ungrateful and arrogant. And I'm like, okay, he's a little cocky, but ungrateful? No, he's very grateful. And so his new plan is to work with the Queen to do something or other and kidnap Clary eventually. And be loyal to Ash. And so I had hope for Ash. I was just like, maybe we will have a Morgenstern that isn't evil. Because I consider Clary a fair child at this point. So I'm like, maybe we'd finally have a Morgenstern who isn't evil. Nope. Looks like that's down the toilet. And he's still obsessed with Drew. And I'm like, well, maybe you can both kidnap your princesses. I just. If we could just figure out how to take the dark artifices off Ash, then we could have goals to do. But I have no idea how we do that. And that fake Jace needs to die, because clearly that's... He nearly killed baby Max. He gotta go. Anyway, I'm gonna end this video here. It's already 40 minutes, and I'm finding that ridiculous for a companion book. But this is me. So, read this. It is so good. It's so good, so good, so good, so good. Read it, read it, read it. You will not regret it. Okay. Yeah, if you like this video, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys!